Hi, everyone. So as we're waiting for more people to join us, I just wanted to say thank you for tuning in today. We're so happy to have you here with us and just to share some of our successes from last year and a look ahead to the coming year. And once again, while we're waiting, I just want to introduce myself and also point out some of my development colleagues who are here on the call, because as our supporters, these are people that are here to help you and just serve as a resource for you. So I'm Shauna Shear. I'm the Vice President for Marketing and Development here at Population Connection. I'm based in San Diego, California. Happy to be here in this beautiful weather. I see my colleague Jennifer Lanaugh here, who's our Director of Individual Giving. Just give a wave. Thank you, Jen. Many of you might be familiar with Jen. Let me see. I don't see many of my, there's Heaven Edwards, who's our Individual Giving Manager. She's based at just outside of Austin, Texas. So finally thawing out now. Yes. All right. And then, of course, we have Stephanie Wolf, who's our Membership Relations Coordinator. She is helping to co-host this meeting. And we also have Natalie Wydell, who's our Director of Digital Marketing, and she will also be co-hosting this meeting.
Hi, everyone.
Natalie will be hosting our Q&A session at the end. So just wanted to mention, or I don't know if you'd like to mention, Natalie, since you are able to chime in.
Yeah, we do have quite a few questions that were submitted, with RSVPs and via email, but if anything else comes up or you would like clarification on anything that anyone's discussing, just type it in the chat and we'll see them as we go. And, as long as we have time, we'll answer as many questions as we can. And then I'll also drop John Seager's contact information. He's happy to, drop his contact information into the chat because he's happy to have conversations or continue answering questions, at any time. So he's a resource for all of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah. I don't want to keep us too much longer as we wait for more people to join in, but I just wanted to say we created this event for you, our supporters, because we want to celebrate you and we want to thank you for making our work possible. So we wanted to share in our successes from last year and involve you in discussion about about our path forward. And once again, we just really want to thank you and look forward to continuing this conversation with you. As Natalie mentioned, we got so many questions. We won't be able to get to everyone's question during the call, but we're going to respond to everyone personally after this. And so please bear with us as we get back to you because we want to answer your questions individually if possible. So without further ado, let me turn this over to John Seager, our President and CEO, and he will kick it off for us.
These formats are always kind of like pushing a wheelbarrow. It gets a little tricky. I want to emphasize, though, and it's in the chat, if anybody would like to let me know things or just chat about things, you can send me an email. There's also a link in there in the chat directly into my calendar, so you can just schedule a time if you want to talk by phone or by Zoom. We could do that as well. There's so much to cover here. So I'm just going to pick a couple of things and then we'll see where it goes from there. The first is, and it would be wrong not to note the incredible importance of this past election and the outcomes. They could not have been closer. I believe I read that a shift of 90,000 votes around the country could have led to a House, a Senate, and a presidency, all in the hands of people we don't want them to be in the hands of. That's how close it was. And I know Brian's going to talk about the activities that our sister organization, our C4, were involved with around that as part of a huge team of people from so many places around the country. But President Biden has already taken critical and decisive steps on issues that matter to us. He has rescinded the horrible global gag rule. He has directed that funding be restored to the UN for family planning. And he has put a team of people, not all confirmed yet, but he's putting in a team of people who really get it about these issues. I think at the agencies that are key for our work, most of the staff there, they're civil servants, they're good people. They've had to suffer through the last 4 years, and I know many of them are anxious to be able to get back to the jobs they want to do. But the steps that President Biden has already taken are key. Brian is going to talk about some of the priorities that we have going forward. I wanted to focus just for a minute or two on a somewhat different area. During the past 4 years, we've been part of what was called the resistance. It was an all hands on deck effort where we had to devote as much as we could on the political side and also within the rules of the IRS on the non-political side to trying to create a better climate for this country. And so we focused a great deal on the problems that were created by the former guy, as Joe Biden calls him. Thankfully, we're now past that. And where we're going to be devoting much more of our attention over the time to come, not to the exclusion of trying to get the things done we've been working on, but we're going to be devoting a lot more attention to trying to make a stronger connection between climate and population. The science tells us, and this is from peer-reviewed scientific studies, if anybody wants to see it, they can just shoot me an email, I'll send it to you, that we could get up to 40% of the emission reductions we need by addressing population growth. 40% of the emission reductions we need globally by addressing population growth. It is arguably the biggest slice of the pie, and yet when you see those pie charts, which have all kinds of important things on it, like electric powered vehicles, wind energy, eating farther down the food chain, all these things, it's fascinating that often that pie leaves population completely out of it, even though it's the biggest slice. There are a lot of reasons for that, but none of them are any good, frankly. This is a situation where we are facing an existential threat to the planet. And why on earth we would fail to mention population when, in fact, among all the solutions out there, it's one where we know exactly what works. We know it's about making sure that people have access to the reproductive health services they want and need. And if we can do that, we could see population challenges evaporate. But it's hard to do that when people won't talk about it. We've seen the history in the past. There was a time when nobody would talk about cancer, and that's a lousy way to come up with cures. Other topics have been off the table in the past, and it's never a good thing. So we're going to be putting a lot of time and energy and in specific ways to getting population onto the table when it comes to climate change. There's some other wonderful groups that work on climate that don't do that, and I don't want to take issue with them because we're not going to be working on electric powered vehicles. And so the good people who do, that's wonderful. We don't do wind energy, and I admire and appreciate the people who do, but we're going to be the ones to make that population connection. And it's not going to happen overnight. I don't know how to have anything happen overnight, hardly. But while we continue to work on getting some key legislation enacted that Brian will talk about, we're going to focus increasingly on climate. I might add, this isn't a new thing for us, and I'm going to turn things over to Pam in a moment. Our education programs, which reach some 3 million students a year, include a major focus on climate connections, but I think we can build on that and go from there. Again, an apology because these back and forths are never a bit awkward on Zoom. Happy to have a one-on-one with anybody who'd like it. It's pretty easy to do. Shoot me an email or click on the calendar link. So let me turn this over to Pam now, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, John. Well, so a lot of folks have been asking me, how did population education fare, and how are we continuing to fare by having to do things very differently in this era of COVID? And some of you on the call who might be familiar with, our day-to-day workings in the program know that typically our staff is traveling all over the country. We're doing professional development workshops with teachers throughout the US and Canada. So, it has been very different for us. Starting in March of last year, we really had to pivot. We had wanted to do more online learning for courses that were always distance learning courses, but this really forced us into it in a very different way. So I'm going to share my screen so I can show you some highlights of what our virtual population education program has looked like over the past year. Let's see. Okay, can everybody see that? Yeah. Okay, thanks. So this is a map of where we were busy all year long. We did close to 600 workshops in 2020. Prior to COVID, a typical year, we would do over 700. So I'm not too disappointed in these numbers because many of the events that were scheduled for the spring months were just canceled outright. And then we had to kind of scramble to show, university professors, school district personnel that we could give them, a robust program virtually. But really, we got going with that as the summer wore on and into the fall. So you'll see that the 146 in-person workshops, those were primarily up until March 10th or so. All the ones that came after that, for the most part, have been online. And the webinars have been a combination of both live webinars and some recorded. We've also had requests for short courses that we've created on Canvas. And you can tell from the map, we get requests from everywhere. Sometimes when people see these maps, they're a little, surprised to see that we do a lot in places like Texas or, in southern states. You'll notice on my state, Georgia is very much blue. And a lot of that has to do with, individual states, what their content standards are for certain courses. In Texas, for example, world geography is a standard course for all the ninth graders to take in the public schools. And there's a very substantial content on population in that ninth grade course. So we get a lot of requests from Texas to be involved. So we're active almost everywhere. There are a few gray spots here. And some of that has to do with where we have trainers. In addition to our staff in Washington, we have a volunteer network of educators all over the country who do workshops for us. Now in 2020, many of them were not ready to join the Zoom room. So staff were doing most of the Pop Ed workshops last year. We have done some trainings to get some of our trainers network ready to do more in 2021. So I'm looking forward to that because, as we've gotten into this, we're getting more and more requests. Just to give you an idea of what a virtual workshop is like, we try to make it as interactive as we can. And so that has taken some ingenuity on the part of my team to come up with ways to have the participants interact with each other and with us in a webinar format. So I'm just going to show you a couple of the types of slides that we're using. This one is for an activity that addresses the idea of the tragedy of the commons. And in a live workshop, we would be doing this with participants sitting in a circle on the floor with poker chips, and they have to grab the resources and talk, and come up with ways that they can sustainably manage a shared resource. So using the Google Sheets, we try to replicate that with chips that they can move around. Another one is one of our popular elementary activities, which is called More or Less, where we ask participants to come up with a word web, or sometimes called a future wheel, where they kind of think about the cause and effect relationships of having more people. And we have this word bank. So this is aimed at elementary, and we keep the words pretty simple. The idea is to get them to make these connections, and they can do that by moving around the arrows and the words. So it's not exactly the same, but we try to do as much as we can to replicate the workshop experience for them. And we're hoping that going forward, once we're back working with people in person, that we'll be able to use this experience of the past year to have a really good hybrid model, so that courses that are typically done online, we'll have something, for them that we didn't have before last year. I also wanted to talk for a moment about some of the curriculum work we did over the past year. One of our big projects was this kit called 330 million in the USA. And even though the Census Bureau hasn't delivered their results yet, and now it looks like it won't be till September, we kind of used this idea of the year of the census last year to come up with some new US focused lessons. And so on the slide, I list some of the topics that these lessons deal with. This is all free to download from our website, populationeducation.org. There's 14 lesson plans, 6 readings. There's some nice new infographics. So we're starting to do some professional development using this curricula. One of the activities, which is actually featured in the next magazine that's coming out very shortly, deals with the idea of how the census numbers and population determine reapportionment and how that leads to gerrymandering. And we have a little activity which I show in the magazine of how you can teach students how gerrymandering is done, so they can see, how insidious it is, but why these census numbers are so important for a variety of reasons. I mean, we often talk about why it's important to our environment, but also thinking about how it's important to our democracy as well. We've also been working on updates of our 3 core curriculum sets for elementary, middle, and high school level. And this is going to be an ongoing project through 2021. We will be starting later this spring, putting up some new units for teachers with updated lessons in all of these categories. So we've also been using this time remotely when we're not doing webinars, working on upgrading some of the lesson plans too. And finally, I wanted to talk about our student contest. Most of the work we do in Pop Ed, our main audience are the teachers. But this is one project that allows us to do a little bit more direct student engagement, or working through the teachers who often use the contest as an assignment. But it's a way to engage middle and high school students of what we're doing. So it's pretty much a year-round project. We launch the contest at the beginning of the school year. We give students until the end of February to submit their entries. And then we use the spring to review them and go through different rounds of judging and make announcements in May before the school year ends. So this slide just shows you last year, we had almost 2,600 videos received. Most of the videos are worked on by multiple students. So we estimate over 5,000 students participated in the project last year. And you can see geographically all over the country, all over the world. So we get a lot of good press for the students too, which is really nice. So last year's contest concluded in May, and then by July, we were working on the topics for this year's contest. And you can see that date up there. Today is actually the deadline. And I heard from my team member, Isabel, who coordinates the contest, that as of right now, we have over 2,000 entries, and students still have a few hours to upload their entries. And each year we pick different topics. Each video has to make a connection to population issues, and students only have 60 seconds to do it. So it's really like a PSA format. And over the years, we've picked a variety of environmental and social topics that fit well with what students might be learning in their social studies and science classrooms. This year, we got pretty topical with things that were timely and that students were thinking about. Promoting environmental justice is probably the most popular of these 3 that we picked for this year, just based on what we've seen coming in so far. The strengthening global health, we're anticipating seeing a number of videos that deal with pandemics and zoonotic transmission. among other topics like maternal and reproductive health. And then the reimagining industrial systems, which is a little bit maybe more of a challenge for students, but thinking big. How do we rethink energy provision? How do we rethink solid waste management? Rethinking, global supply chains, things like that. So the teachers like that we mix up the topics. Many of them use it as an assignment from year to year. So they're always eager to see what we come up with. So that's just some highlights from this end. And, just looking forward to what's coming up in 2021. As I said, we'll be announcing these winners in May. And I invite you all to go onto the World of 7 Billion website. And you can see all the winning entries. You can read some bios of the students. One of the projects we really love is getting to interview these student winners from all over. We're going to be continuing to do our trainings and hopefully get back to having some new train the trainer events too, so we can bring more people into our network as the year unfolds, and hopefully we get back to meeting with teacher groups in person again. So I'll wrap up now and I will stop sharing and turn it over to Brian.
Thanks, Pam, and thank you all for joining. It's great to see all of you. I'll just talk really briefly, a short bit of looking backwards a little bit, and then looking forward. So just looking backwards, our grassroots Fight for Her campaign has been an enormous success. Just in the past 3 years, through 2018 through 2020, we've engaged about 56,000 people across the country who took some sort of action to support international family planning programs and to end the global gag rule. We recruited, trained, and mobilized about 1,500 regular volunteers and about 350 leaders who were among our top activists and volunteers who engaged with us regularly. And we reached out to elected officials and candidates, including now President Biden and Vice President Harris at their public events, especially in New Hampshire, where we had a lot of our activists were based. Our Fight for Her campaign was really targeted on key communities and states across the country. So we had people, we really focused in New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Carolina, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, and in a swing area of California up near Sacramento. And so working with activist volunteers and elected officials in those areas has really helped us build strong relationships with those electeds, with people like Congressman Pappas from New Hampshire, and Joyce Beatty in Ohio, and Susie Lee in Nevada, and Ami Bera in California, who talk to our volunteers, who engage with us on a regular basis, who take personal meetings. It's been really effective at helping us build that strong relationship with really important champions in Congress. And also 2020 was a really difficult year for almost everybody in a lot of ways, but there were some really positive surprises we found. We had to cancel our long planned Capitol Hill Days that was scheduled for last spring. We had several hundred people that were coming to Washington. They all had to stay home. We shifted to a digital event, and it was enormously successly. We had almost 2,000 people participate in a Twitter rally. We had more than almost 1,000 people do virtual advocacy on Monday, where they made calls or visits with their own representatives and senators, which was more than triple what we could have possibly even hoped for in a personal event like that. It was about 1,000 people. They made more than 3,000 calls and meetings. And just quickly on the electoral side, the electoral work that our sister organization, Population Connection Action Fund did, 56 of our endorsed candidates were elected in 2020. We had some pretty painful losses of candidates we endorsed and supported as well, but overwhelmingly they won. And that includes the president and vice president of the United States, as well as, in our target areas, re-electing Senator Jeanne Shaheen from New Hampshire and electing Mark Kelly and John Hickenlooper in Arizona and Colorado was really crucial. And looking at what's coming up in 2022, I think our volunteers and activists are really well placed to help build on the majorities we've won in 2020. Like we're in open Senate seat fights in Ohio and Pennsylvania and North Carolina, as well as defending recently elected Mark Kelly in Arizona. So that's all been incredibly positive for us. And we started seeing the benefits of the election pretty quickly. On January 28th, just a week after the inauguration, President Biden took a series of executive actions on these issues. One, he lifted the global gag rule that had been imposed and expanded by his predecessor. He acted to restore United States support to the United Nations Population Fund. He withdrew the United States from something that the previous administration had sort of spearheaded called the Geneva Consensus Declaration, which was not much of a consensus, but a international agreement with some of the worst human rights violators in the world to declare that there is no international right to abortion, really horrible policy statements on LGBTQ rights, as well as other women's rights. And he took action to begin the process of rescinding the Title X gag rule, which was just as damaging as the global gag rule on the domestic side. On the same day that Biden took these actions in both the House and the Senate, the Global Health Empowerment and Rights Act, or the Global HER Act, was reintroduced. The Global HER Act would be a permanent repeal of the global gag rule. It would prevent a future president from acting unilaterally to reinstate it. That was introduced in the House by Congresswoman Barbara Lee, Ami Bera, and Jan Schakowsky, with more than 170 original co-sponsors, and in the Senate by Senator Jeanne Shaheen with 46 co-sponsors. There's still some people that should be co-sponsors, and we're working to make sure that they are. But with so many newly elected people, there's a lot of staffing shortages, and there's overwhelming amount of legislation coming all the time. Coming soon in Congress, we expect several more pieces of legislation to be introduced. One, a bill to hopefully address this ping-ponging of the support for UNFPA, to find a way to put that out of the reach of unilateral action of the president as well. A bill called the Reproductive Rights or Human Rights Act, which would require that the State Department include issues of reproductive rights and women's rights in their annual human rights reports. That had been done up until the last administration struck that out of those reports. And a bill that would ultimately repeal the longstanding Helms Amendment, which has prevented foreign assistance funds from being used to provide safe abortion care around the world in any circumstances. So that's all coming sometime in the near future. We also are looking forward to the release of President Biden's first budget proposal, which looks like it's not going to happen until May. And we are working hard to make sure that he's calling for the most robust funding for global family planning programs possible. I will be working with our key champions in Congress for them to weigh in with the administration as well, asking for that. Our Capitol Hill Days is going digital again in 2021, scheduled for March 17th through the 22nd, where our key priorities will be calling for $1.6 billion in funding for international family planning programs and passage of the Global HER Act, as well as robust support for the United Nations Population Fund. I'll just close by saying, the election presented us with a real opportunity to make real and lasting progress, but it's going to take a sustained commitment from all of us to make sure that we can get that done quickly. So thanks, and happy to move on to questions from people.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, Pam and John. And thank you to everyone. You've been so active in the chat box. So really appreciate your engagement, and we'll try to get to your questions. Again, if we don't get to what you asked either before this or during the session, we will get back to you afterwards to follow up. And just wanted to reiterate our gratitude to you for making these programs possible. That's why we're here, and that's why we put this event together for you to share what you've helped to accomplish. So that's truly amazing, and we appreciate you so much. So I'd like to turn it over to Natalie. She is going to moderate the questions session.
Oh, John, did you want to step in and say anything before we start questions?
Just three extremely quick things. First, I was remiss at the beginning. Thank you all. We can't do our work without you. We'd be doing something, I suppose, humans tend to, but we wouldn't be doing this without you. And I see so many friends that I know and some I haven't met yet. I see Ricardo and Dane and Eric and Marion and Joanne and so many others. So we're not the biggest organization in the world, but I think we're big enough to get some important work done thanks to you. Second, I wanted to just reiterate, these are awkward. These Zoom things are at best awkward. I'll just send you a second time as a reminder, if anybody would like to have a deeper conversation with me via email and over the phone or Zoom, easy to do. I just sent that again. I can't wait to get back out on the road. I'm so tired of being cooped up, but that's life. The last thing I wanted to mention, several people, and it sort of ties into a couple of questions that were raised. I've had many conversations with our friends throughout the national environmental community, trying my best to encourage them to come on board and not to shift all of their work away from the important things they do, but to make a little more of a connection with population. One of the things we did, and if you could just make a note, Natalie, we'll send in a follow-up a link to everyone. We commissioned a group called Lake Partners last year, Lake Research Partners, to do 2 national surveys for us, one with environmental activists and the other with young progressive activists. The environmental activists were of every age. One of the really important takeaways in it is that they are very, very interested in population. They do want to hear about it. And we've shared that with virtually every national environmental organization to just kind of encourage them to consider stepping in and becoming more engaged. Again, they've got a lot on their plate and there's so much to be done. But we certainly would encourage any organization that wants to be more involved to get more involved. And one of the reasons we did that survey work was to show them that this is not the forbidden topic that some people think it is. And hopefully we'll make some progress on that. So Natalie?
Sure. Thanks, John. Let's see, we've got a lot of questions. We'll start with one for Brian. It was, how does one explain the economic value to taxpayers of the country that providing comprehensive health care to all women of childbearing age has or can have?
Yeah, I think this is an important point that's often overlooked, that the funding of these programs is really an investment that brings enormous returns. And that includes both for investments in overseas family planning and reproductive health programs, but also domestically. And our failure to make those investments has had really severe consequences. Title X has been chronically underfunded. I think it's been more than almost a decade since there's been any increase at all in its funding. And between 2009 and 2019, for example, the number of patients that Title X providers were able to serve dropped by 41%. Now, some of that is clearly about the gag rule that was imposed by the previous administration. I think that caused about, I wrote this down because I want to get the numbers right. The domestic gag rule caused 1,000 health centers across 33 states to be pushed out of the Title X program, leaving 1.5 million people without access to the family planning services they needed. And that every dollar invested in Title X programs brings about $7 in savings. And on the global side, the savings are less dramatic, but the impact is probably more so. Every dollar invested in contraceptives at the global level saves about $3 in cost of other often emergency care. The grassroots and the global gag rule exacerbated our failure to make adequate investments in those programs as well. The gag rule caused clinics to close and caused big contraceptive shortfalls in a lot of countries. And frankly, even if you take the proponents of the global gag rule at their word, which I will advise that you don't, but if you do, if you give them the benefit of the doubt that they really are trying to reduce abortion, the policy is an abject failure because the evidence is overwhelming that the global gag rule has caused pretty dramatic increases in abortion rates and the number of unsafe abortions around the world. So, the good news is, I think that the voters and taxpayers are overwhelmingly supportive of these programs. They don't like the global gag rule. There's pretty clear polling on that. They support access to family planning. They support contraceptives. I used to say, and I think it's still true, that like the only people in America who oppose these programs are somehow conservative talk radio hosts or Republican members of Congress. The support for contraceptives, for example, is at the levels of a cultural norm. It's overwhelming. So it's really about winning the political battle. It's not about trying to convince people they should care about this. They do. They support it. So it's really about making sure they understand what's at stake and where elected officials stand, and giving them the chance to hold people accountable for positions.
Oh, thank you. That was a really good, comprehensive answer. Okay, this is probably a question for John or anyone who wants to answer it. Is what other organizations does Population Connection affiliate or collaborate with?
There isn't enough time to list them all. I would say that we work in several. If you sort of think of population sits at the nexus of various different entities, so we work with different groups for different reasons. I would note, first of all, that we work very closely, and I think this is one group that's important to highlight and call out because it's so important. We work very closely with our friends at Planned Parenthood all the time. I'd note that the Chief Operating Officer for Planned Parenthood of the Rockies is a member of our national board. We collaborate with them. Our focus with respect to that is to be the leading grassroots advocates for international family planning. It's not because we don't consider domestic family planning to be just as important. It's just that our friends at Planned Parenthood tend to take the lead on that. So we try to be leaders where we need to be leaders and be good participants and followers where that's called for. We work with, and I sit at the table with a whole variety of sexual and reproductive rights and health and justice groups where we talk constantly about how we can work. One of the things that differentiates us from many of the groups that we work with on the international side is many of them get a lot of their money from our government and other governments. And that can make it difficult for them sometimes to get out front of certain challenges. We neither seek nor accept any government money, don't get it, don't want it. And so that gives us a freedom. And also it puts us in the position that when we're lobbying for these programs, we're not lobbying for money for us. We're lobbying for money for groups like Pathfinder International, for International Planned Parenthood affiliates, and so forth. One new, not new, but one area that's growing for us is we're developing really positive partnerships with smaller organizations on the international scene that often kind of fall below the radar of the big foundations. If you go to our website, I did a blog this week about a group called Tamiraquire in Venezuela that we've worked with and we support, that works in rural Venezuela to help women in desperate need of reproductive health services. And they do a lot with very, very little. And we're able to provide modest support for them. But the other thing we're doing more and more of these days is looking to provide a platform for their leaders around the world so they can speak to Americans and to others, but certainly to Americans directly about what's needed. And we have these partnerships in Kenya, in Guatemala, in Venezuela, and in other places. There's a lot more to it than that, but all of our work, one way or another, is collaborative. We don't do any of it on our own.
Hey, John, if I could add, one of the great benefits of these international partnerships, I think, is on January 28th, when President Biden did act to lift the global gag rule. We were able to put American reporters in touch with some of these leaders from around the world to talk about what it meant for them and the people they're trying to serve in their own countries. And I think those are important voices and important stories that need to be told in this country. So it was really a really, I think, powerful way to get some of those stories told.
Now, I'll just say the next issue of our magazine, on the cover, has a picture of one of our partners, Melvin Oyo from Kenya, who was a family planning practitioner who was accepted at the Kennedy School at Harvard. And although they covered the tuition, that was a pretty steep lift just to even live in the United States while she was getting that master's degree. And we had her go out around the United States and speak on the issue from her own experience, which also helped cover some of her costs. Now she's back in Kenya, and she started an organization working with young women and girls who are just in desperate need. And these are critical partnerships for us, and we think we can make a real difference.
This next question is a pop-ed question that's kind of, a good continuation of all of this, is whether pop-ed is a national program or if there's any international reach.
Good question. Primarily based in the US, and as I said, we do a lot in Canada too. The international reach has been more through our student contest. We've been getting entries from all over the world, which is really nice. It's a challenge to be culturally competent, and with our small staff, we feel like we have enough to keep us busy, being based on US curriculum standards, and they vary from state to state, so that keeps us on our toes. We have had Peace Corps volunteers who've modified our work for the work they're doing in other countries. But that's something to take on to do more international outreach. And we just right now don't have the kind of staffing to do that, but we have plenty of work in Northern America to keep us busy right now.
If I would just add a couple of quick points. I'm in this context, I'm very ambitious. Pam well knows that, and Pam is also someone who wants to take on the world. We have found that there is this incredible demand for our materials here in the United States, and it takes a certain amount of staffing just to maintain all of that, and to again, we have to be cognizant of the standards in every single state and work on that granular level to make sure it fits. We're always looking for opportunities. I would note, for example, that our dot video has been translated and modified into major languages all over the world. And so whenever there's an opportunity, we certainly welcome educators from around the world who want to use our materials and work with them any way we can.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the dot video, because I saw there was a comment in the chat about having videos to use. That dot video, I mean, it gets millions of views every year. It's been our most popular teaching tool for many, many years. You know, we update it periodically. But if you haven't visited the site that houses it, worldpopulationhistory.org, there's a lot of interactive things you can do with that map. It's not just viewing the video anymore. You can kind of drill down into the dots that light up on the screen to find out more. There's UN projection graphs to look at, and we keep those up to date. So those resources are used very much internationally. And when we look at, the analytics on our website, we can tell that people are accessing them all over the world.
This is, excuse me, this is another Brian question. There was one on what are the chances of eliminating the global gag rule?
Forever.
Yes,
Forever.
permanently.
Yeah. I'm optimistic. I think, I think this is our opportunity to get this done. We have majority support in both the House and Senate. We have a president who should sign it. So I think the chances are pretty good. It's going to take, as I said at the end of in my opening, I think, it's going to take sustained commitment from all of us to make sure that this stays on the radar of leaders in Congress. Because as you can imagine, there is a massive amount of problems that they're being forced to try to fix quickly, ranging from getting serious about the global pandemic to across the board. And this has to stay at the top of the list. And so, the fact that we have really strong relationships with key champions, Barbara Lee, who is the lead sponsor of the Global HER Act, is now the chair of the important appropriations subcommittee in the House, the State Department of Foreign Operations, that controls the funding levels for all of these programs. And she's in a great place to make sure the Global HER Act gets done this year. The same with Jeanne Shaheen in the Senate, who's on the important appropriations committee. And so we're looking to make sure that the Global HER Act gets included in the annual spending bill that goes through Congress later this year. The House passed the Global HER Act twice in the past 2 years. So I think we're good there, and the Senate now should do it too. And we're not gonna accept no for an answer. We're gonna do everything we have to make sure this is part of that package.
And just chipping in, the great late Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, always used to say all politics is local, and it is. And that's why the work we've done on a very targeted basis through our political arm, our Action Fund, is so important. And one of our key states is New Hampshire, where Jeanne Shaheen, who is the lead champion for us in the Senate, serves. And I recall when I was doing some speaking in New Hampshire a few years ago, I was back and forth across the state so often, I actually started to recognize the dogs in the yards. You can make an impact, and you don't have to be the biggest organization in the world if you focus and you concentrate and you make an impact. And we know we're making an impact because of the following. Key elected officials are interested in and ask to speak to our activists. They want to make that connection. It isn't a question of just banging on their door in the hope that they'll open it. They want to. And I could give you example after example, but we have some wonderful key members of the House and Senate who are deeply committed to this, and that's the only way you can get something on the agenda.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that happened in 2018 was, Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick in Arizona from Tucson did an ad for her campaign while wearing one of our T-shirts. So I took that as a win.
One more question that I think probably is kind of a longer answer question that any of you or all of you could answer is a discussion of some of the biggest success stories in programs to prevent early marriage and unwanted pregnancies around the world.
Sure. I guess I can take a lead off on this. We were founded in 1968, and we, two scientists and a lawyer. You always got to have a lawyer. And while we're no way am I trying to take credit for this. It takes many villages, not just one village, to get anything done in this world. But I would note that in 1970, and that's the decennials are a good way to mark things, there were about 4 nations on Earth that where family size was at or below replacement rate. Replacement rate is just above 2 children per couple. It's pretty basic in a healthy society anyway. Today, there are nearly 100. You know, on the other hand, there are still more than 100 countries where we're above replacement rate. In some cases, there's been places like Chad and Niger, virtually no progress at all. But the key here is to move from a vicious cycle to a virtuous cycle. I'm going to kind of close by telling you an embarrassing story that happened to me, because it happens. I often get caught up short. I was invited a few years ago to speak to a conference of young feminist leaders about 600 to 700 young people. I'd say 90% of them were young women. There were some men there. And I got up and I thought I'd throw a challenge out. And I said to them, imagine that you have just become the Minister of Health and Education in a small country in the global South somewhere. And you're given a budget of, let's say, enough money to, let me get the numbers head. Let's say it's $25 million or $250 million, using that example. You could provide, I think I got my numbers right. Anyway, it was enough money that you could provide contraception to 10 million women, or you could provide those 10 million women, young women, with education, but you couldn't do both with that money. Really useful. Well, the next speaker up was a young woman who'd been accepted early admission to Harvard, and that should have been my first warning as to what was going to happen to me. She got up, she looked over, and she pointed in my direction and said, "That's the problem. For too long around the world, women have been told that's the choice. That's the choice. They can have this or they can have that. It's a false choice in this world. We need to do both." And when she came down, having spent some time in politics, I said, I know when I've been taken out to the woodshed, and I deserved it. And I learned a lesson that day. The key thing here, though, is, and if I could do one thing to change the world, it would be to ensure that every woman everywhere has as much education as possible, but enough so that she can function effectively and independently in her society. But there's no but, because I'll get kicked again, as I should. It's worth noting that in a world where you have to fight like crazy to get any resources, getting contraception into the hands of women who want to use it is so critical. There are 218 million women today in the developing world who don't want to be pregnant but aren't using modern contraception. We, and I'm speaking broadly here, we know how to meet that challenge. It costs about $25 per woman. Quick math, that's $6 billion a year. Our goal is to get the United States to increase its investment from the current $600 million a year up to $1.6 billion. So we'd kick in $1 billion of that. And then we can go to the 20 or so other donor nations, the Western Europe, Canada, Japan, Australia, and say, we've nearly tripled our investment. Now you step up as well. And that's the strategy here, is to do that. And if we do that, I would note that those 218 million women have a combined more than 100 million unplanned pregnancies a year. We know what to do. We just simply have to take this incredible opportunity that we have right now with the House, the Senate, and a president to move forward right now while the opportunity lasts.
Thank you, John. I feel so inspired right now, especially knowing that the people on this call right now are the people who are helping make that happen. And we're so grateful to you again. I think we're going to wrap it up now. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of your questions. You sent so many in advance, and obviously there was some great discussion on the chat. Someone requested the chat transcript. We'd be happy to share that. I think we can save it. and we'll follow up with you. So just, I want to say thank you again. We popped this slide up on the screen so you know where to get in touch with us if you don't already. Natalie, do you have any further comments?
Or I just wanted to once again thank everyone for joining us. And also John mentioned the report that we'll share with everyone, and we'll also put together the resources and links that were discussed and shared in the chat sort of into a wrap-up email for everyone. So you'll have one place to get them all. We'll include that link to schedule a meeting with John if you'd like to chat with him and anyone else. So
Not to break in, and we'll put my link information in there. I consider, I guess Zoom is better than nothing, but not much. I would much rather talk with each of you individually, and there's nothing rhetorical about that. Nothing would please me more. It's the favorite part of my job. And so if you have anything you want to raise, good, bad, or indifferent, or anything else, I'm here and I'd love to hear from you.
absolutely.
All right. Thanks again, everyone.